Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Now, you probably noticed that 2017 was one of the most exciting times in a long time to be building a new computer. Despite that though, it did actually all start off in a somewhat boring and disappointing fashion in January with the release of Intel's underwhelming Kaby Lake CPUs, which offered no real improvements over 2015's Skylake architecture. Factory overclocking really was the name of the game there. Things though changed dramatically in March as AMD finally released their hotly anticipated Zen architecture with the Ryzen 7 series, and with that ended half a decade of getting bulldozed by the competition. From that point forward, it was a busy year. We also got some new GPUs, and Intel had a second go at things with Coffee Lake. However, while there was a lot to get excited about when it came to PC hardware in 2017, there was also plenty to be upset about as well, or at least frustrated. Unfortunately, some of these problems have gotten worse and probably will continue to worsen throughout 2018, and it's making building a PC right now increasingly difficult. So let's talk about these issues. I've decided to break this topic up into what will probably end up being a three-part series. And in this part 1, we're going to talk about DDR4 memory pricing and why it's so high right now. So let's get into that. The big issue plaguing those wanting to build a new computer or even update an old one, whether it be for gaming or productivity, is DDR4 pricing. From July 2016 to July 2017, a 111% increase for the average selling price of DDR4 memory was seen. That's an insane increase over a 12-month period, and the worst part being that it's continued to increase since then. What this means is for the consumer, an 8GB DDR4 2400 memory kit cost around $35 US in 2016. A year on, you could expect to pay a little over $70 for the same product. Now fast forward today and consumers are faced with an asking price of at least $90, so that's about 170% more than what we were paying roughly 18 months ago. So, why has DDR4 pricing increased so much in the past 18 months? As is always the case when DRAM pricing explodes, it's a supply and demand issue. Right now, demand is heavily outweighing supply. It's difficult to predict when supply will improve, but most reports suggest that this will happen in late 2018 when the manufacturing of 64-layer and 96-layer 3D NAND flash reaches maturity. Okay, so it's a supply issue, but why? What has caused supply to either decrease or demand to increase? Well, I believe we've been faced with a sort of double whammy situation. The major DRAM suppliers shifted focus away from DDR4 production due to tight margins and have been investing production elsewhere. In previous years, growth in the traditional desktop computing sector was slow, and this meant nobody wanted to pay a premium for DDR4 products. And as a result, manufacturers didn't want to make the memory if they're not going to achieve their planned targets and returns. With limited demand in late 2014 with Intel's Haswell E and Haswell EP range, which continued in 2015 with Skylake and then again in 2016 with Broadwell, the limited supply wasn't really an issue. However, in 2017, we saw a rapid shift in market demand towards desktop computing. Not just Intel, but now AMD were also shipping processors supporting DDR4 memory. No doubt you can also blame cryptocurrency miners for the demand in DDR4 memory in 2017. I'm sure many of the mining rigs built that year did use DDR4 memory. Further increasing the demand, and this is probably an even bigger factor, is the smartphone industry, which drove up the demand of not just DRAM, but also NAND as well. It's a different type of DDR4 memory that's produced for the mobile market, a low-powered DDR4, LPDDR4 for short. Memory manufacturers such as Samsung, they make more profit selling LPDDR4 memory in premium smartphones, hence the shift in capacity. So at that point, demand started to outweigh supply, prices increased, and DDR4 margins were no longer tight. By mid-2017, the price of memory modules had soared significantly, as we saw in the example given earlier. Okay though, that's not really a problem. Memory manufacturers will just ramp up production, and we'll be back to the way it was in 2016. Happy times for PC builders. Well, Sadly, no. According to market research firm DRAM Exchange, the three major DDR4 suppliers being Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron slowed down their capacity expansions and technology migrations to maintain prices in 2018 at the same levels seen in the second half of last year. Obviously, they're doing this to sustain strong profit margins. This means you probably shouldn't expect DDR4 memory pricing to fall anytime soon, certainly not till much later in the year. The construction of new fabs is underway to help the strained supply, but they won't be ready for mass production until 2019 at the earliest. It's predicted by Gartner that DDR4 pricing will crash in 2019, and history would suggest this is likely to happen as it's the sort of cycle we go through every few years with memory pricing. China does have the potential to change things here though. Their aggressive approach to the semiconductor market could cause pricing to become even more unpredictable. For example, Chinese memory could flood markets worldwide, causing pricing to plummet. Right now, there is a large number of Chinese-owned fabs under construction, and it is expected that China will overtake second place for investment in semiconductors this year, as it equips many of the new fabs it began constructing in 2016 and 2017. It's also been reported that China's National Development and Reform Commission is investigating the possibility of DRAM price fixing between the major industry players, and this of course has been sparked by the price surge that we've been talking about. If found guilty, I'm not sure what the ramifications would or could be, so we'll have to see how that story plays out. It would appear though that they do have quite a bit of power here, as SK Hynix and Samsung both have a number of facilities within China. So in 2018, you have a choice. Hold off on building your new PC or just take the hit on memory pricing. Ideally these days, PC gamers will want a 16GB kit, and those cost at least $170 US, though decent kits are priced closer to $200. Granted, it would have only cost you around $70 to $75 in the good old days, but try not to dwell on that. Unfortunately, it's out of our hands. The problems PC gamers face looking to upgrade, or worse still, build a new PC from the ground up, are more than just inflated DDR4 memory prices. In the next part of this series, which will be online in a few days, we're going to discuss graphics card prices. We'll talk about what happened last year and why it's continuing, and what you can expect later in 2018. So stay tuned for that. I'm your host Steve. I'll catch you again next time.